You felt like a stain at the dragon spire, not a stain that means something. A real, physical, visible stain on a white shirt that is otherwise perfect. The tower was built to make you feel like you didn't belong. The walls were moving. Not like moss growing on a rock. Breathing like they were alive. Every hallway was lined with huge panels of crystalline bone that had been taken from the bones of ancient cosmic dragons. They glowed in a slow, rhythmic way. Gold that is soft. A dark shade of violet. A color that wasn't in the human spectrum but made your teeth hurt when you looked at it for too long. They polished the floors until they shone like mirrors. Not marble. Not tiles. The glass of dragons. A material that was so well made that it not only showed your image but also your thermal signature, electromagnetic field, and, according to some engineers, your emotional state. I once saw a nervous diplomat walk down the main hallway and leave a trail of light blue footprints behind him. The floor had read his fear and showed it to everyone. A very friendly place. I walked through this beautiful building in steel-toed boots that left gray scuff marks on the dragon glass. The color of my jumpsuit was like old motor oil. Not because it was made that way. It was blue before. It looked like it had been pulled out of a swamp after 3 years of crawling through engine bays, coolant leaks, and hydraulic failures. My hands were stained for good. Not dirty. Dirty. There is a difference. Something is dirty, you can wash it off. When grease stains your skin, it means it has become part of it. It lives in the folds of your knuckles. No matter how hard you scrub, it stays under your nails. It becomes part of who you are. Jake Mercer is my name. 34 years old. Born in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is on Earth. Brought up in a garage. My dad worked as a mechanic. He had a mechanic for a father. If they had anything more complicated than a horse and wagon to fix, his father probably would have been a mechanic. The point is that fixing things came naturally to me. In a literal and figurative sense. I got to the Dragon Spire the same way most people get to places they shouldn't be. A bad break in a government contract. 6 months ago, the Draconic Empire and Earth's Interstellar Commerce Division signed a service agreement. The Dragons needed someone to take care of the gravity stabilizers they had bought for their lower-tier cargo bays. Humans made the gravity stabilizers. Not expensive. Easy. Trustworthy. The kind of boring machinery that kept crates from moving around while they were being moved. Of course, the Dragons could have made their own. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of ours. But they didn't want to build a simple gravity stabilizer. It was like asking a brain surgeon to fix a paper cut. So they paid people to do it. That's how I got here. Worker on a maintenance contract. At the bottom of the food chain. In fact, it's lower than the bottom. There was a very clear social hierarchy at the Dragon Spire, and humans weren't even on it. We were put in a group with furniture and animals. Useful enough to keep on hand. Not important enough to say anything about. I didn't care. I worked. I lived in a small room on level 12, which was the maintenance level and was next to the water recycling plant. The smell of chlorine and engine coolant was in my room. The bed was made for a species with a tail, so there was a strange groove in the middle of the mattress that I had to fill with blankets to make it flat. But it was mine. The pay was good enough for me to send money back to my mom in Terre Haute, which was the whole point of being here. 4 or 5 months, nothing bad had happened to me on the Spire. I fixed the stabilizers for gravity. I changed the power couplings that were worn out. I cleaned out the ventilation filters. Easy work. Work that is honest. The kind of work that didn't need a degree in quantum physics or a blessing from the cosmic source. You only need a wrench, a diagnostic scanner, and the willingness to get your hands dirty. Most of the time, the Dragons didn't pay attention to me. Those I did talk to acted like you would if a plumber came to your house. Necessary but not someone you'd want to have over for dinner. The high-caste dragons like the priests, engineers, and military leaders were even worse. They didn't just ignore people. They really hated us. They thought we were the universe's big cosmic joke. A species that had somehow found a way to travel through space even though it didn't have any magical powers, a connection to the divine, or crystalline biology. Just stubbornness, meat, and bones. High Priest Valerian was the worst of them. If you gave someone complete religious power and no sense of humor, you got Valerian. He was 8 feet tall, which is about average for a draconic elite. His scales were a deep blue, almost black, with gold veins running through them like rivers of molten metal. His eyes were bright amber slits that went up and down and never blinked. Not ever. One time, I saw him stare at a lower-level employee for 3 minutes without blinking. The subordinate lied about a crime he didn't commit just to get it to stop. Valerian was in charge of the Empress's life support systems. Not a doctor. Not really. In Draconic society, there was no line between medicine, engineering, and religion. People thought the Empress's body was a divine machine. Her crystal heart was both a body part and a holy object. Taking care of it was a way of worship. Valerian was the high priest of that religion. He hated people so much that it went beyond just being racist. It had to do with religion. He really thought that people were a mistake. A mistake in the universe. A species that should have died out millions of years ago because of natural selection, but somehow stayed alive by being very, very annoying. He would make a noise every time he saw me in the hallways. A low, rumbling growl that shook his chest and made the walls hum. It wasn't a real threat. More like a statement of anger. Like how you might groan when you see a cockroach in your kitchen. I learned how to stay away from him. I went the long way around level 12. Instead of the main elevators, I used the service elevators. I ate my meals in my room instead of in the common areas. It wasn't being a coward. It was a way to stay alive. You shouldn't poke a bear. Not a bear that is 8 feet tall and can breathe plasma, though. But everything changed in the morning, and there was no way to avoid Valerian. At 400 hours, the alarm went off and woke me up. Not a normal alarm. It wasn't the soft chime that meant a gravity stabilizer was broken or a ventilation filter needed to be changed. This was the deep, bone-rattling pulse that told me something terrible was going on. The kind of alarm that made the walls bleed red light and the floor shake under your feet. I got out of bed and ran to the floor. Running for real. I didn't even tie my boots. I ran down the hallway and grabbed my tool belt off the hook by the door. Other maintenance workers were coming out of their rooms, looking confused and only half-dressed. Sarah Chin, a woman, worked on the electrical systems on levels 10 through 14, walked up next to me. "What's going on?" she asked. "I don't know. The code for the alarm is Crimson Absolute. That has never been turned on before." I understood what Crimson Absolute meant. Everyone on the Spire knew. The code said that the Empress was in danger. No political danger. Not a threat to the military. Dangerous to the body, the mind, and life itself. The Draconic Empress, the living goddess who ruled over an empire that included 47 star systems, was dying. Level 1 was where the Empress's room was. The Spire's top. The most sacred place in the whole Draconic Empire. No one had ever been there before. No one had ever been asked to come. No one had ever been allowed to get within 10 levels of it. There were security checkpoints, biometric scanners, divine wards, and armed guards whose only job was to keep anything unholy out of the holy space. When I got to the entrance to level 1 and saw that the doors were wide open, the guards were gone, and a river of scared Draconic officials was pouring out like water from a broken dam, I knew something had gone very, very wrong. "Get out of the way. Get out of the way." A Draconic officer pushed past me, and his scales were pale with fear. 2 priests came out behind him, their ceremonial robes burned and smoking. One of them was in tears. I had no idea that dragons could cry. The tears were clear. They fell from his eyes like little diamonds and broke on the floor. Sarah took hold of my arm. "Jake, we need to go back. This isn't our level." She was correct. The rules were clear. During a Crimson Absolute event, human staff had to go back to their rooms and wait for orders. We worked in maintenance. We shouldn't have been anywhere near the Empress's room, but something made me move forward. Not out of curiosity. Not being brave. Something easier than that. Something that works. I could hear a sound through the open doors and past the officials who were running away. A noise that all mechanics are familiar with. A sound that goes beyond species, technology, and divine engineering. It was the sound of a machine breaking down. A stuttering rhythm. A pulse that should have been steady but instead was skipping, catching, failing, recovering, and failing again. Like a car that runs on fumes. Like a heart that had forgotten how to beat. I went through the doors. The Empress's room was very big. It doesn't even come close to being a cathedral. There were clouds near the top of the ceiling because it was so high. Real clouds. The air inside the chamber was carefully controlled to be like the upper stratosphere of the draconic homeworld. The air was thin and cold, and it smelled and tasted like copper and ozone. There was living crystal on the walls that pulsed with the sound of death. Gold. Flicker. Black. Gold. Flicker. Dark. Like a lighthouse that has lost power. The Empress lay in the middle of the room on a raised platform made of pure dragon bone that I had never seen a draconic Empress before. No one had. In diplomatic briefings, they were called beings of significant biological complexity. That was like saying the sun was warm. The Empress was not a dragon like the soldiers and priests were. She was something else. Something that had evolved beyond physical form and then, through some ancient biological magic, had chosen to remain physical anyway. She was huge. Not tall. Big. Her body looked like a landscape as it stretched across the platform. Her scales were clear like stained glass, and you could see how her body worked inside of them. Rivers of glowing liquid moving through clear veins. Organs that pulsed with their own light. Muscles that sparkled with electromagnetic energy. She was like a machine. A biological engine with cosmic power. And she was so beautiful that it hurt to look at her. But she was going to die. There was an opening in her chest. Not by surgery. Not on purpose. The scales on her chest had come apart on their own, like flower petals, revealing the core of her being. Later, I would learn that this was an involuntary defensive response. The Empress's body opened up to get energy from outside, like a drowning person gasping for air. Her heart was right in the middle of her bare chest that it was clear. The size of an engine in a car. A complicated structure with many chambers made of interlocking crystal matrices that should have been glowing with bright white light. It was dark instead. Flashing. Every pulse was weaker than the one before it. There was a longer pause between each pulse. The beat was off. 30 of the best draconic engineers and priests were working hard around the platform. They had used their most cutting-edge technology. Thin, glowing filaments connected the Empress's heart to pure energy conduits. These conduits were meant to direct divine power straight into the core, restarting the rhythm and stabilizing the pulse. It was like a defibrillator for dragons. Technology that has been improved over the course of 10,000 years. No way to mess up. Not able to fail, and it wasn't working. I could see why. I could see the problem even from across the room, where I stood in the doorway like a ghost with oil stains who had accidentally walked into heaven. The conduits were sending energy to the heart, but it wasn't getting to the core. It was hitting something and bouncing back. A loop of feedback. The energy would come in, hit the blockage, turn around, go back through the conduit and overload the system. They were making the heart worse every time they tried to restart it. High Priest Valerian was in charge of the operation from the front of the platform. His hands moved in precise, ritualistic ways, directing the flow of energy with religious accuracy. His face was a mask of focus. But I could see something else behind the focus. Something I had never seen on a draconic face before. Fear, Valerian said, "Give Conduit 7 more power." His voice was steady, but his tail was moving around behind him. A sign of a dragon. They could control their voices, faces, and posture. But the tail never told a lie. "High Priest, Conduit 7 is already at its highest output," a junior engineer said. I said increase it. Any more will put it at risk. The engineer did what he was told. Conduit 7 lit up brightly, sending energy into the Empress's heart. The crystal glowed brighter for a moment. Hope shone through the faces of all the dragons in the room. After that, the feedback loop caught the energy, turned it around, slammed it back through the pipe. Conduit 7 blew up, sending a shower of crystal shards flying. 2 engineers were thrown across the room. One hit the wall and didn't get back up. The other one slid across the floor, leaving a trail of glowing blood, and the Empress's heart grew even darker. "No," Valerian said softly. Then louder. "No. No. Go through Conduit 12 instead. Go around the main matrix. Directly injecting into the secondary chambers." They tried. It didn't work. The feedback loop caught every try. The energy bounced back no matter what path they took. It was like trying to fill a bottle that was already full. But the bottle wasn't full. It was blocked. There was something in the heart that kept the energy from getting to the core. I moved forward. Then one more. No one saw me. They were too focused on the goddess who was dying in the middle of the room. I walked slowly along the edges, and my boots left gray scuff marks on the sacred dragon glass floor. Probably a sin. I didn't care that I got close enough to see the heart clearly. Close enough to see what the sensors, conduits, and 10,000 years of divine technology couldn't. There. Right there. In the place where the second and third chambers of the crystalline heart meet. An object that gets in the way. Not a blockage of energy. Not a divine error. A blockage that is physical, mechanical, or structural. A part of the crystal matrix had broken and moved out of place. It was very small. Could be as big as my thumbnail. But it was right in the middle of the main energy channel, like a rock stuck in a fuel line. It was so easy. So stupidly, mechanically simple that their sensors didn't even notice it. Their technology was made to find changes in energy, divine resonance failures, and quantum decoherence. It wasn't made to find a broken crystal that was stuck in the wrong place. That was like using a satellite to look for a penny on the street. The wrong tool for the job. I knew what had to happen. The crystal piece had to be moved or taken out of the way. After that, the energy channel would be clear. Then the pipes could do their job. After that, the heart would start up again. Easy, except for the part where I would have to reach into the chest of a living goddess in front of 30 of the most powerful beings in the Draconic Empire, all of whom thought I was less valuable than the dirt on their floors. I took a breath. And I moved forward. I can fix this. 3 words. Words that are easy to understand. The same things I had said 1,000 times before. To customers whose engines are broken. To send officers with broken generators. To my mom when the kitchen sink got clogged for the 3rd time in a month. But right now in this room, those 3 words hit me like a bomb. All of the dragons in the room looked at me. 30 pairs of amber eyes with vertical slits that don't blink. It was so quiet that I could hear the Empress's heart beating slowly against the crystal walls. Thump. Stop. Thump. Stop. Stop. Bang. Valerian was the first to speak. What, he said, and the word carried the weight of a civilization's scorn, is that creature doing in this room? I said again, I can fix this. My voice was steady. My hands weren't. To hide the shaking, I shoved them into the pockets of my jumpsuit. I understand the issue. There is something in the way of the energy channel. There's a broken crystal fragment in the way, so your conduits can't get to the core. Be quiet. Then there was laughter. It all began with one of the junior engineers. It was a loud, sharp bark that sounded like a snort in Draconic. Then another one joined in. Then one more. Half of the people in the room were laughing in seconds. Not the friendly laughter that comes from sharing a joke. The cold, cutting laughter of total mockery. Valerian didn't find it funny. His amber eyes looked at me, and the look on his face was more than just contempt. It was an offense. Deeply religious offense. It felt like being in this room and speaking in this holy space was against the law of the universe. Get rid of this thing, he said softly. 2 guards came up to me. Big. Armored. Wait, I said as their clawed hands reached for my arms. The voice came from the stage. From the group of senior engineers that were around the Empress. A tired-eyed female dragon with silver scales stepped forward. I would later find out that her name was Commander Seraphine. She was in charge of the Empress's personal security. Not an engineer. Not a minister. A member of the military. In my experience, soldiers cared more about getting things done than following the rules. Let him speak, Seraphine said. This is crazy, Commander, Valerian said. A mechanic who thinks they can. Feedback explosions have killed 2 of our engineers. The Empress's heart rate is now only 30% of what it was before, and it's still going down. Seraphine's voice was dull. True. I will listen to any answer. From anyone. Including people. Valorian's tail hit the floor so hard that it broke the dragon glass. But he didn't say anything. He stepped back, pressed his lips together, and waved his clawed hand at me to tell me to talk. It was clear that he wanted me to kill myself. I walked to the end of the platform. Everyone in the room was looking at me. I could feel the heat coming from the Empress's open chest. It was very strong. It felt like being next to an open furnace. The air sparkled. My skin felt tingly. "Look here," I said, pointing into the chest. "Junction of the second and third chambers. That piece? It's moved about 2 millimeters out of place. It's right in the main energy channel." The engineers moved closer. One of them turned on a scanning device and moved it over the area I had pointed out. He looked unhappy. "Change the settings on the scanner," he said. "There's nothing there. The scanner doesn't show anything wrong." I said, "Because your scanner is looking for energy signatures. This isn't a problem with energy. It's a problem with the machine. A physical barrier. Your scanner can't see physical movement at that scale because it wasn't made to. It's like trying to hear a whisper during a storm. The noise floor is too high. Another time to be quiet. Then more laughing. This time it's quieter. Not sure." "He's saying our technology is flawed," one of the priests whispered. "No," I said. "I'm saying that your technology is looking for the wrong thing. It's not broken. This tool just isn't right for this job." Valerian moved forward. He was much taller than me, and when he talked, his breath was so hot that it made my eyes water. "You dare say that 10,000 years of divine engineering can't see what your primitive eyes can see?" I said, "My primitive eyes are looking for a simple problem. Your divine engineering is looking for a hard one. The answer is sometimes easy. Mechanic, the Empress's heart is not a human engine. A wrench won't fix a goddess." "I don't think so," I said. "But you can't fix a blocked pipe with a prayer either." The room was completely quiet. I had just done what was probably the most blasphemous thing in draconic history. Putting the Empress's divine heart next to a clogged pipe. Valorian's scales got darker. His claws got longer. For a moment, I really thought he was going to kill me right there on the holy platform. The Empress's heart skipped 2 beats in a row and the whole room shook. The golden light faded away almost completely. The clouds that were close to the ceiling started to go away. The living crystals on the walls turned black. And all the dragons in the room knew it. The connection they had with their Empress, the divine bond that linked every member of the draconic species to their living goddess, flickered like a candle in a storm. "She's at 22%, someone whispered. 18, another corrected. 15. Seraphine stared at me. Her silver eyes were steady, but I could tell she was scared. She was terrified that someone who was watching everything she had promised to protect would get away. "Can you really do this?" she asked. Not making fun of. Not dismissive. A real question from a soldier who needed an answer. "I need 10 minutes and to be able to get to your scrap metal," I said. "And everyone needs to get off the platform. I need space to work." "This is crazy," Valerian yelled. "I won't let a person, High Priest Valerian." Seraphine's voice cut through his protest like a knife. "The Empress is going to die. Your ways didn't work. You can either let the person try or you can tell 47 star systems why you let pride kill their goddess." The words hung in the air like a sentence. Valerian glanced at Seraphine. He stared at me. He looked at his Empress's dying heart, which was flickering in its crystal cage and getting dimmer by the second. And he took a step back. I had 10 minutes to save a god. No stress. The first thing I had to do was make something that wasn't there yet. A device that sends out kinetic pulses. Not a way to get energy. Not a channel from God. A simple, mechanical tool that could give the broken crystal fragment a shock and either knock it back into place or completely dislodge it. Imagine it as a hammer that is very accurate and very soft. But it had to work inside the chest cavity of a living thing whose body temperature was high enough to melt steel. "I need stuff," I said as I took off my tool belt and put it on the platform. "Throw away the draconic alloy. The stuff you get rid of when you're done making conduits. The scraps. The pieces that were turned down." One of the younger engineers looked at me and blinked. "Do you want our trash?" "Your trash is the strongest metal I've ever worked with." I saw a piece of scrap draconic alloy survive being hit directly by a hydraulic press in a cargo bay. The press broke down. The alloy didn't. "Yes, I want your trash." The engineer nodded to Seraphine. "Give him what he wants." A pile of scrap draconic alloy was dropped at my feet in less than 2 minutes. Pieces that are twisted. Rods that are bent. Plates that are cracked. The dragons thought this was trash. It was a gold mine for me. I got down on my knees on the platform and started to work. My hands moved without me thinking. This is what I did. This was me. Not a diplomat. Not a scientist. Not a religious leader. A mechanic. A man who used his hands to fix things. I chose an 18-inch long rod made of draconic alloy. Straight. Very strong. I needed it to be the main part of the pulse device. The way it gets there. I bent one end of it with my wrench. The alloy fought back. It was very strong. I had worked with human-grade titanium for 3 years, so I knew how to push it in the right direction and at the right angle to get it to do what I wanted. Next, I needed a way to get power. Not a way to get energy. A source of mechanical power. Something that could hold kinetic energy and let it go in one big focused burst. I took a spring out of my tool belt. Standard issue. The type of spring that would be in the reset mechanism of a gravity stabilizer. Easy. Trustworthy. Just what I needed. I used a scrap piece of alloy as a mounting bracket to attach the spring to the curved end of the rod. After that, I added a trigger made from a broken conduit coupling and a piece of wire. The outcome was not pretty. Very ugly. It looked like something a kid would make in their garage. A Frankenstein machine made from junk and extra parts. But it would work. I was sure it would work because the physics were easy. Push the spring down. Let go of the spring. The spring sends a precise, focused kinetic pulse to the curved end of the rod, moving it forward. The pulse goes through the draconic alloy, which was strong enough to keep its shape even when the chest cavity was hot. The pulse hits the broken piece of crystal. The piece either goes back into place or breaks free completely. Easy. Mechanical. What's that thing? One of the engineers asked, looking at my creation like they were watching a car accident. I call it a Kickstarter, I said. It looks like trash. Most of the best tools do. I stood up and looked into the open chest. The heat hit me hard. Standing this close made my skin red. It would be worse to go in. A lot worse. According to the engineer's readings, the Empress's chest cavity was about 900 degrees at the edges and getting closer to 2000 degrees near the core. When working near the Empress, draconic engineers wore special suits. Suits made of the same crystal-like material as her scales that can handle the heat, radiation, and electromagnetic fields. I didn't have a tuxedo. I wore a jumpsuit made of cotton and polyester that had grease stains on it. "You're going to burn," Seraphine said. There was no warning. It was a statement of fact. "Probably," I said. "The heat near the second chamber junction is over 1200 degrees. Your hands will." "I know." I moved my fingers. Looked at my hands. The hands of a mechanic. With scars. Calloused. Grease stains that would never come out. These hands had reached into engines that were too hot, grabbed red-hot exhaust manifolds, and held wires that were sparking while standing in puddles of coolant. Their hands weren't very nice. They weren't hands from God. But they were strong. And they belonged to me. I took 2 pieces of scrap draconic alloy and roughly shaped them around my hands. Not quite gloves. More like rough shields. They wouldn't stop the heat completely. But they would give me more time. A few seconds of safety. Enough space to reach in, set up the device, start the pulse, and pull it out. "Maybe," Valerian said from across the room, his voice full of barely hidden hope. "If this fails, you will have killed the Empress with your primitive hands." "Not helpful right now," I said. "Eternal torment. Your mind is taken out of your body and put in a crystal matrix where you will, really not helpful." "Let him work," Seraphine said. I took one last breath of cool air. The Empress's heart was now at 12%. Maybe 11. You could barely see each pulse. A faint flicker of gold in a field of darkening crystal. She was running out of time. I was running out of time. I put myself at the edge of the chest cavity. The heat was already too much. It felt like my face was pressed against a hot stove. I cried. Every breath made my lungs hurt. I held up my rough hand shields, grabbed the Kickstarter, and reached in. The pain came on quickly and was very bad. It hit me the second my hands crossed the chest cavity, and it was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Not just hot. Not just on fire. It felt like every cell in my hands was being told that it was going to die. A sharp, exact, and almost polite pain. It was like the Empress's body was saying, "You don't belong here, and here's the proof." The scrap alloy shields worked. Not really. They took the worst of the direct heat, but the radiant energy went right through them and into my skin. I could feel my skin cooking. Not a figure of speech. Making food. A second later I could smell it. Nice. Sickening. The smell of my own hands on fire. I pushed harder. The inside of the Empress's chest was full of light and crystal. The crystalline structures were huge when you got close to them. The different chambers of her heart looked like the domes of a cathedral above me, and each one had its own fading rhythm. There were rivers of glowing fluid flowing between the chambers, carrying energy that should have been bright white but was now a sickly gray. The whole system was going down. One organ at a time. Room by room. Like a city that goes dark when the power goes out. I felt my way around. In here my eyes were useless. The light was too bright close to the working chambers and too dark close to the failing ones. But my hands knew what to do. They had always known. My dad blindfolded me and gave me a broken carburetor when I was 6. "Put it back together," he said. "A good mechanic doesn't need to see. He needs hands that can think." It took me 11 minutes to put that carburetor back together. My dad never blindfolded me again. He didn't have to. The lesson had stuck. I felt my way to the place where the second and third chambers met. The crystal matrix here was not the same. More rough. The structures around it, which were smooth and geometric, gave way to something rough and uneven. This was the breaking point. The spot where the crystal had broken and moved. And there it was. The piece. It was exactly where I had seen it from outside. A piece of crystal no bigger than my thumbnail was stuck at an angle in the main energy channel, blocking the flow like a dam blocks a river. So little. It is so stupid to kill a goddess over something so small. I set up the Kickstarter device. The end of the rod that was bent pushed against the piece. I could feel the resistance in the metal. The piece was stuck tight. It wouldn't move even when I pushed it gently. It needed a jolt. A sudden, strong mechanical impact that would either knock it back into place or break it free completely. I pulled the spring mechanism back. The spring got smaller. I could feel the coil's potential energy growing. One shot. That was all I had. You only have one chance to hit this piece with the right amount of force and in the right direction. It wouldn't move if there wasn't enough. If I put in too much, I could break the surrounding crystal matrix, which would cause a catastrophic structural failure that would kill the Empress faster than the blockage. No stress. I could hear Valorian's voice from outside the chest cavity. The heart rate is 9%. 7%. The heart would stop completely at 5%. And once a crystalline heart stopped, there was no known way to start it up again. The crystal matrices would stop vibrating. The energy would go away. The Empress would die, and with her, the divine link that kept the Draconic Empire together would die as well. My hands were shaking. Because of the heat. Because of the pain. Because of the fear. I could feel the blisters on my hands getting bigger and bursting in real time. The heat was making the alloy shields bend and lose their shape. I had seconds before they broke down completely. I shut my eyes. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. I wanted to feel this moment with just my hands. The way my dad taught me. The spring was squished. The device was put in place. The piece was right there just below the tip of the bent rod. I could feel the angle. I could feel the pressure. I could feel the crystal matrix's grain, how it wanted to move and where it needed to go. And I shot. The spring let go. The kinetic pulse moved through the draconic alloy rod with a sharp, clear crack that I could feel in my bones. The curved tip hit the crystal piece exactly where it needed to. Not too hard. Not too soft. Exactly right. The way you hit a bolt that won't turn. The way you push a gear that's stuck out of place. How to get a broken thing to remember what it was supposed to do. The piece moved. It turned and slid back into its original place in the crystal matrix with a sound like a key turning in a lock. A soft, crystalline click that echoed through the whole heart. And then the world blew up. Not in a literal sense. But not quite. The energy that had been building up behind the blockage, trapped and compressed by the broken piece for who knows how long, was suddenly set free. Everything. At the same time. It was like a tidal wave of raw, divine power that had nowhere to go for days. Now it was flooding through the energy channel like water through a broken dam. The shockwave hit me first. It grabbed me and threw me out of the chest cavity like a rag doll. My hands were still holding on to the broken Kickstarter device as I flew backwards through the air and crashed onto the platform 10 feet away. I hit hard. My left shoulder broke. When my head hit the dragon bone, everything went white for a second. But I could hear it. I could hear it even though my ears were ringing, my head hurt, and I was confused. The sound of the heart. Not the weak, stuttering flutter that had been going on for hours. A heartbeat. A real, strong heartbeat that shook the platform under my back. Thump. Strong. Very clear. Sure. Then one more. Thump. Another one. Thump. 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 A beat. A steady rhythm that got faster with each pulse. I turned over and looked at the Empress's heart. It was shining. Not the pale gold it had when it was dying. Not the clinical white it has when it works normally. A new thing. Something I had never heard of in any briefing or manual. The crystalline heart was beating with a warm, deep orange light. The color of burning wood. The color of a blacksmith's shop. The color of heat, fire, and raw energy. Energy from people. My power. The kinetic pulse did more than just get rid of the blockage. It had left a mark on something. Some evidence of the mechanical force, the human-made impact, and the greasy determination that had pushed it. And now that trace was spreading through the crystal matrix, mixing with the divine energy, and making something completely new. The Empress's chest cavity started to close. One by one, the clear scales folded back into place, closing off the heart. The rivers of glowing liquid changed from gray to silver to bright white. The clouds near the ceiling changed shape. The living crystal on the walls came back to life. And the room was quiet. 30 draconic priests and engineers stood still. Not moving. They stared at the heart that was beating again, the glow that was spreading through the Empress's body, and the color that had never been there before. Orange. Warm. Like a person. Valorian's mouth was open. His amber eyes were big. His tail was completely still, which I would later learn was the draconic way of saying he was in complete shock. I got up on the platform. My hands were ruined. The skin was burned. With blisters. Some parts are blackened. I couldn't feel my fingers. I looked down at them and saw that the grease stains were still there, even though the burns were there. Still there. For good. Heart rate at 40%, a junior engineer whispered as he read his instruments. 50. 60. 70. The numbers kept going up. 80%. 90. 95. After that, it went over 100%. The Empress's heart was beating faster than it had before the crisis. The readings say it was stronger than it had been in years. The orange light wasn't going away. It was coming together. 112%, the engineer said, his voice breaking with disbelief. Becoming a permanent part of the crystal matrix. The core output is 112% of the baseline. Valerian said, that's not possible. All sensors confirmed the readings. The heart is working harder than it should. The kinetic pulse didn't just get rid of the blockage. It made the crystal matrix stronger. The point of impact is showing a higher density of structure and better energy flow. I would have laughed, but I was too busy trying not to faint. The first person to move was Seraphine. She walked quickly across the platform and knelt down next to me. I could see that her silver scales were wet when I got close. Not with sweat. Dragons don't sweat. With tears. The same clear tears I had seen on the priest before. But these were not the same. These were a relief. Your hands, she said, looking at the damage. Yes, I said. Need some ice. She looked at me. Then, for the first time since I got to the dragon spire, a dragon smiled at me. A smile that is real. Not the show of dominance that involved showing your teeth, which was a smile in draconic social situations. A real warm, thankful smile. You impossible creature, she said. They took me to a medical bay on level 3. Not the level 12 human medical bay, which was basically a closet with a first aid kit in it. The real Draconic medical bay. The one with crystal healing rooms and technology that could regrow organs, fix tissue, and maybe even bring the dead back to life if you asked nicely enough. Dr. Callis, a Draconic doctor, worked on my hands for 3 hours. He didn't say anything to me the whole time. Not because he was rude. He was in shock. He kept looking at my hands, looking at the burns, looking at the tissue damage, and shaking his head as if he were having a very hard time talking to himself about biology. The thermal exposure should have completely destroyed your hands, he finally said, breaking his silence. The temperature at the second chamber junction is at least 1200 degrees. At about 300 degrees, human tissue starts to break down. You shouldn't have hands. Not burned. Not there. But they're not. No, they aren't. He stopped. The rough spots on your palms. The scar tissue from past injuries. Years of hard work have built up keratin. These layers of damage, like old wounds that have healed over, skin that has been burned and fixed and burned again, they made a barrier. Not as good as our crystalline armor, but it works. Your hands lived because they had been hurt so many times that the damage itself became a way to protect them. I looked at my hands. Now that it was bandaged, it was covered in a crystalline healing gel that smelled like lavender and tingled like menthol. The gel was doing its job. I could feel new skin growing under the bandages. The pain was getting better. So you're saying that my hands survived because they were already hurt? I said slowly. Basically, yes. Your scars kept you safe. The investigation took a day. The Empress herself shut it down. She called Valerian to her room and asked him one question. Is my heart beating? Yes, Empress, but is it beating stronger than before? Yes, the readings show that output has gone up, but the purity of, and the person who healed it is not dirty. He is a doctor. You're fired. Valerian left the room without saying a word. His scales were light. His tail was still. He didn't start another investigation. That day the Empress did something else. Something that had never happened before in the history of the Draconic Empire. She gave an Imperial acknowledgment. Not to a dragon. Not to a priest, an engineer, or a general in the army. For me. The Imperial acknowledgment was the best thing the Draconic Empire could do for someone. It was usually only given to people who had done something amazing for the Empire. In 10,000 years there had been 47. They had all been Draconic. Up until now. The Dragon Spire's Grand Hall was where the ceremony took place. There was someone from every level. There were thousands of dragons in the hall, and their scales sparkled like a living mosaic of color. Seraphine was my escort and stood next to me. She had been given the job of being my permanent contact, which she seemed to take seriously but also with a hint of humor. As we walked toward the platform, she whispered, "Try not to trip." No promises. The Empress was present. Sitting on a throne made of living crystal that moved and changed shape around her body like water. She was even more impressive when she was well. Her scales were lit up. Her eyes spun with gold. And through the see-through scales on her chest, you could see her heart beating with a warm orange glow. I stood in front of her in my jumpsuit. They had given me ceremonial robes. I had said no. If I was being honored for who I was, I would show up as who I was. With grease stains and everything. The Empress's voice echoed throughout the Grand Hall as she said, "Jake Mercer. You got into my heart when everyone else failed. You didn't bring any divine power with you. No holy tools. No old knowledge. You brought your hands. Your experience. You wouldn't accept that something couldn't be fixed." She stopped. The hall was quiet. In the Draconic Empire, we have always thought that power comes from above. From God. From the past. From the complicated and the smart. You have shown us that power can also come from below. From the easy. From the useful. From the hands of mortals who are brave enough to reach into a god's chest and say, "I can fix this." She opened her claw. Inside was a tiny crystal no bigger than a marble. It was the color orange. The same warm, human orange that was glowing in her heart. This crystal formed in my heart when your device hit it. It is a part of who I am. And it's a part of you. I give it to you not as a reward but as a way to show that I appreciate you. You are no longer a servant in the Draconic Empire. You are not a maintenance worker anymore. You are a heartsmith. The first of your kind. I picked up the crystal. It felt warm in my hand. It throbbed with a weak heartbeat. Hers and somehow mine. "Heartsmith," I said, trying out the word. "Will I get a raise?" Again the Empress laughed. The third time in 100 years. This time the dragons in the grand hall laughed with her. Not laughter that makes fun of you. Not cold, harsh mockery. Laughter that is real. Swarm. All-inclusive. People were laughing because they were starting to understand something they had never understood before. That the person with dirty hands and a good wrench is sometimes the most powerful person in the room. I was still on the Dragon Spire 6 months later. Not as a worker who does maintenance. Not as a servant. As a new thing. Something that had never happened before. The title of Heartsmith turned out to mean more than just a title. The orange trace in the Empress's crystal matrix kept changing after her heart was fixed. It spread out slowly, making the structures it touched stronger, better at conducting electricity, and more resistant. The draconic scientists were very interested in it. They didn't know what to say. The orange energy didn't follow the rules of divine power. It didn't follow the rules of crystalline resonance. It worked on a completely different principle. A law of physics. An idea about machines. A principle of people. The Empress's heart was now a mix of different systems. Part crystal from the gods. Part of human kinetic energy. And it was stronger than either system on its own. The effects were huge. The Draconic Empire had been trying to reach perfection through complexity for 10,000 years. More advanced technology. Conduits that are stronger. Energy that is more refined. And here was proof that the opposite approach, simplicity, directness, and mechanical force, could do what divine complexity could not. I didn't fully understand what this meant until Seraphine told me over dinner one night in the officers' mess on level 5. She ate with me because it was her job as my liaison, but I also thought she liked spending time with me. Or at least liked seeing how the other officers reacted when a person sat down at their table with a tray of reconstituted protein bars. She picked at her food with sharp claws and said, "You don't know what you've done, do you?" "I fixed a blockage. It's what I do." "Jake, you changed the religion of an empire that has been around for 10,000 years. A piece of humanity is now in the Empress's heart. In a literal sense. The orange line is human kinetic energy that has been permanently embedded in the most sacred object in our society. Every time her heart beats, it beats with a piece of you in it." I chewed my protein bar and thought about it. "So, you're saying I accidentally joined your religion?" "I'm saying that the next generation of draconic kids will learn that human energy is one of the things that keeps the Empress's heart beating. That mortal hands saved the life of a god. Jake, that's not a small thing. That changes the way our species thinks about power at its core." I looked at her. At her silver scales, which I had learned to read like a book over the past 6 months. The small changes in color that showed how she was feeling. How they got brighter when she was happy and darker when she was serious. They were somewhere in between right now. "Does that bother you?" I asked. She thought about the question. It would have 6 months ago. 6 months ago I believed what I was told. That people were less important. That your tech was old-fashioned. That your biology was weak. That you lived not because you were strong, but because of a cosmic clerical error that let a weaker species live. And now, I think the clerical error might be the most important thing that has ever happened in this galaxy. Before I left the Spire for my first official assignment as Heartsmith, the Empress called me one last time. I went into her room by myself. No guards. No officials. There was no ceremony. It was just me and the living goddess whose heart I had fixed with a wrench and a spring. She looked different as she sat on her throne, bathed in the warm orange light of her heart. Not like a god. Like a person. An old, tired, and thankful person. "I have a question for you, Jake Mercer." "Go ahead." "When you stepped forward in that room. When everyone said you couldn't. When Valerian made threats against you. When the heat almost killed you. Why didn't you stop?" I thought about it. Thought about it a lot. Not for the first time. For 6 months I had been thinking about it. What made me do it? Why did I move forward when every logical part of my mind told me to move back? I said, because the machine was broken. And I'm a mechanic. That's what I do. I fix things. I don't care if it's a goddess's heart or a gravity stabilizer. It's broken. And things that are broken should work again. The Empress stared at me for a long time. With their spiraling galaxies, her golden eyes looked for something on my face. I don't know if she found it, but she smiled and said, "You humans. You humans who are impossible, stubborn, and carry wrenches. The universe messed up when it gave you consciousness but not the ability to know your limits. And that mistake could save all of us." I smiled back. "We'd rather call it a feature than a bug." She laughed again. The fourth time in 100 years. And as the sound bounced off the crystal walls of the room, I could have sworn her heart beat a little faster. Orange. Warm. Like a person.